Thank you all for, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks, Lori, and thanks, Brian, for organizing this. I know we're all in our labs and we're all working away, and it's like, I wonder what so-and-so is doing, and so it means a lot that you all take the time out to organize it, so all I have to do is show up and present. Thanks. So today I'm going to share a little bit about a project that I've been working on. It's recently grown in attention, but it's really a collaborative project between our lab, between KU Athletics, and we've really involved our students. So it really has that element of Jayhawks Rising. So the best title I could come up with is just a model for sports science and football. And then talking with Trent Herta, he's like, which football is it? Because we have American football, and then we have real football. That's what the crowd says, real football. And then we have what they call, I just learned from Yang, proper football, which we term soccer. So we're talking college American football today. I want to thank you all for being here. Like I mentioned, it's truly a collaborative effort. Part of this presentation, early next year, I'll go out to the American Football Coaches Association, and I will have some time in like the educational portion of their conference to share about progress from our project and future direction. So it's not very common where you have a scientist go to a coaches, conference and they'll give you a spot. So I'm excited for that. And I welcome all feedback. But in addition to that, thanks to Dr. Muntz for directing our lab. Thanks to our students for their support, and thanks to faculty, colleagues, and others. So here's just a quick overview. Really my background, how did I get here? I think that's important. I was an athlete. It's been over 10 years since I've competed in football. I played in college, and time flies, but I always had questions. Any former athletes in here? Any current athletes in here? Anybody play noon ball? I know there's a couple of you guys in here. I always had this question in football. The first one is related to two-a-days, of course. Like, oh my goodness. The first couple practices, it's just like you can't recover, you can't catch up. You spent all winter, spring, summer lifting and running, but your body is just fatigued. And then over time, you adjust and you adapt, and then the last few days become a grind. So as an athlete, at the start of every fall season, two-a-days, like, oh my gosh, why? Why can I adapt? So it started there, and then I've had some opportunities to coach where we run into some of those similar problems. And from a performance perspective, we have athletes that they're at an elite level, or they might be developmental, but what is the factor that will take them from good to great? So those have been some of my questions, and then now as a professor, sports scientist, I'm able to collaborate and answer some of those questions through collaboration with KU football, so it's pretty neat. And here's a bit about the Athletic Performance Lab. We're investigating several different topics. They range from sport technique to training methodology and various topics in between. And this is in collaboration with several universities, such as Stanford and Oregon and UC San Diego. What's neat about this is just the perspective, the people that you interact with, the places you can see. So it's been a really cool journey, and it means a lot to have that support there. So some of my research interests, any given day, I'm sure you all are wondering, what am I up to? Because we might have kids in the evening, right? And those kids could be lifting weights, or they could be jumping on force plates, or they could be doing speed ladders. Or just this week we had in an Olympian that's training for the next Olympic cycle. And so it looks pretty similar. He jumped on force plates and he sprinted, but my three primary interests are profiling athletic performance, generally how healthy are athletes, what is their body composition, what are their strength and power and speed profiles, and then I have a very special interest in strength conditioning approaches. Once we know that, then can we design effective programs to improve athletic performance and human potential? And then towards the end is elite athletic performance. So ultimately resulting in how can we support optimal athletic performance? So whenever we consider strength and conditioning, there are a few just foundational components. So what I've learned as an athlete, as a coach, and as a scientist, although we might have a high performer or we might have a developmental athlete, sometimes there's room for improvement in one or all of these areas. So a needs analysis is more related to the needs of the athlete and the demands of the sport. What we're finding and what I'll show here in a bit, which I'm really excited about because we were able to publish some data from American football using methods from soccer or proper football, is that we're not able to accurately quantify the demands of sport, and it affects the way that we prepare athletes for competition. So it might look like these athletes are underperforming or it looks like they're fatigued. It's just that we haven't really captured the needs. And then from there it progresses across this timeline. Where we develop testing assessment batteries. I think most folks in here are kind of familiar with how that progresses. And so it brings us to where we are today. The model that I'm going to share a little bit about. There was a paper published a couple years ago, and you see the title there. And it directly highlights the problem and the issue. So American football, especially at the collegiate level, hundreds of millions of dollars yearly conferences are making, right? So there's a ton of revenue generated, and there have been questions from sports scientists about where that revenue is distributed in relation to developing knowledge, managing knowledge, and translating knowledge so we can advance our understanding of the sport. So I read that, and it was really inspiring, honestly. I thought it was well written, and the group that published it, they're renowned for their work in strength and power athletes. So they're publishing work, they're training athletes, and they've highlighted a major issue. So that was the motivation for what we have here at KU. So we have a active project called Gridiron Performance, the Science of Football. We're going into year 3 of the project. It's really taken like a lot of time and energy and effort, but I'm really, really glad that we've been able to collaborate and put that forward. So how does it all work? I'm sure you all are curious. Did we just go over into the weight room and say, hey, let's start collecting data, coach, we're ready? Sometimes it doesn't really work that way in the applied setting. The big thing is trust. So it took a while. It took about a year for me being here, and then I know Dr. Fry was here many, many years to establish that trust. I know other professors in the department, you all have established that trust. So Division I athletes in general are unique because they have to go out and perform, right? So we can generate research questions, but they usually should be in alignment with the culture and the vision and the mission of the organization early on. So if you develop that trust, we gain opportunities to make an impact. So a mental model that we've been working with that I think has really supported this program is the assess, develop, perform model. So whenever we have conversations with coaches, it's usually there's an issue in one or all of these areas. Either they're not able to accurately assess the characteristic they like to assess, or athletes are underperforming, or on the other side, they have an All-American, they have someone that signs a pro contract and it's like, wow, I wish we could capture that. And so it's identifying that, and then the develop piece is the bridge. How do we develop athletes to achieve more? So as the project has developed, it's been in a phase type development. So early on, it was really just identifying topics, developing relationships, forming collaboration. That's phase 1. And we knew if we weren't successful there, then how do we progress to phase 3, where we integrate some of these performance science approaches. Each phase has had different elements of Jayhawks Rising. So we now have 2 PhD students that also intern with KU football, and they assist or co-lead some of the data collection that we're utilizing for research purposes. So force plate testing, Maddie Rink, if you see her around, she's usually co-leading force plate testing, GPS monitoring. Sam Norwood assists with GPS monitoring, strength, power, speed development, data collection. So Students here are gaining real world practical experience that can be applied later on in the future. And then of course, research and discovery, as you would guess. We're able to collect the data, and then we're fostering collaboration. So something unique from some of our publications, current findings so far, a recent publication related to key performance indicators and starters. Whenever you think about football, what's like one of the first things that comes to mind from a performance aspect? Speed. Bigger, faster, stronger. Come on. Yeah, that's football. You go into any weight room and you're going to see an element of strength, power, speed, bigger, faster, stronger. And so during my time at Nebraska Kearney, believe it or not, their director of strength conditioning was my former strength coach. So it helped that we had that relationship. We were able to do some measurements there that have set the stage for what we can do here. Some of the questions were related to strength, power, and speed, so we developed a testing protocol to measure a little bit more than that. What we found is within starters at the Division II level, there are some differences, as you would expect, in strength, power, speed between position groups. However, there's a similarity in mobility. That mobility was assessed with 3D markerless motion capture, and it was squat depth. So whether you're a defensive lineman or whether you're the quarterback, there's not a significant difference in how deep you can squat, which made us pause and say, wait a minute. So we've invested a lot of time and energy and effort into really making these complex programs and really integrating a lot of this technology to support performance. But really it might be as simple as maintaining function at the ankle, the knee, and the hip. So mobility was non-significant. And so that's, it's generated some conversation just across the field and at the coach level where there's impact. So that's one of our current findings. Another one is related to periodization. So the organization and the structure of your training approach, right? What we've seen reported in literature and soccer, because they've had more access to technology and they've integrated longer, there are periodization models to the external workload for athletes, right? So if you're 4 days out from a competition in soccer, you usually start at 20 to 30% of the match demand. The next day, you move a day closer, you increase that to about 50% of match demand. You move a day closer and you ramp up, right? And so what we're seeing is sports have unique periodization approaches. What works in soccer generally may work at different levels for athletes, but I was just curious, like, okay, we're collecting this data. Coaches are asking, hey, are we doing this right? Are we programming right? And so we started to analyze just the cyclical structure of how they're preparing their athletes. So this also came from Nebraska Kearney. This data set comes from a team that won 8 regular season games and had multiple athletes selected to conferences or all conference teams. So what we saw, it's actually the opposite in football. It's the opposite. So what you see here on the screen is from left to right is game day -4. So like a Tuesday practice, game day -3, Wednesday practice, and then so on closer to the game. The solid line that's running laterally is just the game demands. So the first day of practice is usually 40% higher than the game. The second day of practice is usually about the same, 40% higher, and then the second day or the third day of practice is around 20% higher. Through the course of the week, it decreases. I know as I say it, it's like, well, soccer, they ramp up, and then football, they start high and they ramp down. Why might that be? Well, the demand of sport, I would imagine. It could be philosophy. It could be culture. What we know right now is that probably this is just one model that works, and it might not even be the model that works. There might be very durable athletes, but we've been able to develop knowledge here in this area that's driving some questions. It's inspiring thought. The author of the Where's the Science in Football paper, actually emailed me, and we were able to talk for a couple hours. It's like, I read your work, and okay, so where did you start at, and what's the relationship with KU football now, and what does this periodization mean? Because this is something that I've wanted to work towards. So that's very special, and to involve students in that process has been nice too. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, but
10 minutes.
oh, 10 minutes. Okay, so current findings, and then now we're talking future directions. So where we are today is we've really progressed within our research line. So we have students that are there, they're interning. We've been able to modify some of the data collection methods, because whenever we first started, it's just, there wasn't a method. There wasn't a standardized method for the counter movement jump. There were some athletes that might jump with an arm swing, some athletes that might jump with hands on hips, and then some athletes that didn't jump at all. And that measurement is what they use to make critical decisions on. So we've installed valid methods for data collection. It's kind of where you see towards the left end, and now we're progressing. I'm really curious about, again, training load distribution throughout a season. I'm really curious about starters versus non-starters, and we've integrated heart rate monitors into practices. We also have recovery wellness, so we can measure subjective wellness and stress as well. So this is the project. This is, I guess, my presentation and my update for today.
Can you go back a couple slides to your graph? So,
Yeah.
What are you measuring on the y-axis?
So y-axis is percent estimated gain value. So this is 100% of gain value. So duration is 100% of the duration. So this is like 60 minutes.
Gain value of what?
Of games, of competition. Duration, distance.
Okay, all right.
And then yards per minute. So some of the variables that we measure are related to volume, so duration, total distance that you run. Some are related to intensities.
Is this all running stuff?
Duration is just practice duration. So how long are you on the practice field? And so we utilized micro technology called GPS units. It's a 3-inch by 4-inch piece of technology, 1/4 inch thick. It weighs less than 1 ounce. So it's about that big. It goes into what looks like a spandex crop top, goes into the back, and then it samples 10 times per second.
So like the 2D load and 3D load, that's like accelerometer stuff?
Yes, so these are instrumented with accelerometers.
So is that like how hard they get hit?
They're more like a movement characteristic.
Okay.
However, we're working on some projects. Maddie Rink, we are quantifying contacts and collisions so there are different types of practices whenever you play football. You have what we call a lids only practice, which is just helmets. You have what we call a half rack, which is helmet, shoulder pad, and then you have full rack, which is helmet, shoulder pad, and then girdle or pants. The big question in that area is there's a new NCAA ruling that states you can only have so many full padded practices, and we're curious about contacts, collisions across each.
So the dark bar is game day -2, but like is game day? Oh, okay, it's horizontal. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So does value different? Like in each one, like in duration, that's the time of the game, like it's 90 minutes is game?
60 minutes is game.
Or whatever that is, that's the game duration.
That's the game.
And then
So,
distance is how long, like distance they travel in a game?
yeah, how much distance they travel
But
in
60
a game.
minutes is clock time, right? A game's like 3 hours.
And that's what we captured the entire, so we went back and forth with the reviewers just a little bit. They were like, okay, because you can cut it, right? You can cut it at the start and the stop. In practices, you can cut drills, which there's been some research on that, but we captured the entire duration.
And were these just starters?
These were actually starters and non-starters.
Because like the third string punter, like doing nothing on game day, right?
Right. We discriminated though, so they had to participate in more than like 75% of games, and whenever we made that cutoff, it was like 90% and above participation. Yeah, the punter.
I was going to ask in the graphics, the bubble, the last slide you had, did you ever look at, I was thinking balance, like, you hear a lot about that in football, linemen doing ballet and dance and balance issues?
We hadn't, but there have been a couple questions that have come up. We can, because of the technology that we've implemented and that's already there, we can pick up on it. We hadn't though. Maybe Dr. Muntz and I will collaborate on some balance studies.
Yeah, where do you think that fits in?
I think it fits in well because we're able to capture that whenever we do the jumps on the force plate. So we have them jump a couple times a week. And so the same test that measures jump height and power and force, we can see where they distribute their weight.
And then collisions, I think a balance after collision, staying on your feet.
It plays a role. It gets to key performance indicators. So at this level, if everybody is well trained, strong, powerful, fast, does it come down to balance, mobility, proprioception, and how does periodization, maybe how does training stress affect that? Yeah. So you're giving us more ideas. Jordan, did you have?
So, from my understanding, like what hitting's gone down in practice, for instance. So, do you think these numbers were like 5 years ago much higher, especially for the load numbers?
I think it depends.
Like a huge number compared to game day now.
And I know, and that's one of the, I think this is an important finding, and it gets back to the needs analysis, where we try to provide recommendations for, okay, how often should we practice? How long should we practice? And if we were to say, yep, just prepare them like soccer athletes, then they might be underprepared. And so for the collision aspect, we're working on quantifying that as well. Yeah.
That'd be really interesting.
Super cool. Yeah.
I always feel a little out of my depth when I ask an exercise science question, but I'm just curious, knowing that the metrics and variables that you all are measuring tend to be more intrinsic to the athlete themselves, but recognizing that sports don't exist in a vacuum and that there's these external factors that also influence performance, do you all have any plan to, or have you began to investigate maybe some of those external factors that may also influence athletic performance, particularly among college athletes who are transitioning from high school sports into more of that collegiate landscape that has a lot more money, stress, and pressure built in with it, and also things like weather conditions, like just these external factors that play a role in athletic performance?
Sure. Great question. Well, you're sitting next to the environmental, researcher. So we hadn't investigated those. We'll often report like just the ambient air temperature in some studies. There are some recent findings though, by Dr. Brian Mann, where they measured like testosterone, cortisol around and throughout a season. And they noticed that during periods of like testing, finals, midterms, cortisol increases. So there is work being done in that area, and I can see us going to that area, but also there are some things that we can control, and so we have to prioritize those. So if we're under preparing our athletes, it's like, okay, well, we can control to an extent. We can control that. And if there's a check and balance, then we can also adjust. The uncontrollables, sometimes you might go play in a cold place. Sometimes you might go play in a hot place, but we can also be prepared for that. So we haven't gotten there yet. I've thought about it quite a bit because with the subjective wellness surveys, athletes, they typically do those every day. So we're able to see, okay, so how do you perceive stress, mood, energy, and so on and so forth. And we're seeing these trends throughout a semester too, to where our goal is to become proactive and not reactive, I guess, to be short. Yeah.
This was Carney data?
This is Carney data. Mm-hmm.
I'd be really curious, like, just to see like how different programs compare, right? And hard data to get, but I'm guessing some teams just practice better. How we want to characterize that than other teams, right?
Well, it reminds me of soccer. You have these different philosophies where the coaching philosophy is box to box. Like it's high volume and it's high duration, and just know that if you're an athlete and you're selected for this team, those are the characteristics they like to see or develop. And then you have these others where it's just compressed and it's tight and it's very dense and it's a short practice. This team was more so, really it was a more efficient, dense type practice. It was high speed. Something interesting is the density of practice, yards per minute, was always like matched to the game. You see the drop off in duration, but usually density is pretty level here. Throughout the week, they're practicing above game. So that's a good point. So we're looking for collaborators as well. So if you know anyone.
But getting to George's question, it's like, back in the golden age of college football, which was roughly from like 1994 to 1997. Some high performing teams tackle to the ground, right, in practice. And there was a great deal, my sense was a great deal of variability in terms of how much like live hitting and tackling to the ground happened across programs. Is the NCAA like just not letting you do much of that anymore, or teams just don't do it because they're afraid of injuries?
I don't know that I can only give you an opinion. There's some NCAA regulations, but there have been changes in coaching philosophy mainly because of access to information. And then whenever we talk about access to information, who is providing that information? Is it from someone at a university? Is it someone that has a high follower count on Instagram or Twitter, but they train the athletes, And so if they're saying, hey, you should have so many days of high collision practices, and then you should have lower. Even rugby, I think everybody's familiar with the tush push and the Philadelphia Eagles. They've come into the NFL space and the football space, and they're just different. I agree, though. There are different philosophies for athlete development.
But just subjective, you think there's a great deal of variability across, say, D1, Power 4, and like just how much hitting, how much checking the ground is happening?
I think it depends. I think from generally, I know whenever I played football way back when, we had a similar structure. Usually your first 2 days of the week, you practice longer. And then towards the end, it's a shorter practice. The way they practice, I'm not really. There might be some variability there. Austin?
Are you planning to collect data like year in, year out, like potentially like to see like from a freshman through a senior, like to see just how it changes or anything like that?
Yeah. So these are questions that come up. We're collecting data, and we have been the last few years. And it's really like if we can capture and characterize performance, then we can, over the long term, yes. How far does a redshirt freshman run? How many practices do they participate in? And relative to an all-conference athlete, someone that's drafted pro, someone that's playing pro, is there a signature in there? So,
yeah, because I'm just interested with like the transfer portal. Like you talked a little bit about the trust piece, and athletes know. It takes time to develop trust in programs, coaches, systems, that kind of stuff. And so I'm curious, like, when you see these transfers going from one program who did really well, maybe like a mid-major, to a bigger program, it doesn't translate. And so I'm just curious with these different kind of factors that you're looking at, is it truly just, different structure and practices, programs, like, and their bodies just aren't accustomed to that, and they only get 1 year there, and then they hit the portal again. So I just think there's maybe some really cool things that, even from just like recruiting and scouting of athletes, that could be maybe, I don't know, side bonus to stuff like this?
I should have put an asterisk up here that said probably, right? So this is probability, there's some probability in here, and we can't necessarily say just because you go out and you hit this distance, you're going to the league, man. So there are some different things that, the nature of sport is complex. There's a psychological piece, there's an environmental piece, there's a performance piece, the recovery, but I think I agree. I think there is some value there. Is that my time? Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
So this is kind of, I'm a third-year doctoral student under Dr. Johnson here, and my research interest is with para-athletes, so both sports performance and then probably also touching some part of the community health and stuff, because we're trying to get the disabled person to exercise. That's the main goal of the para sports originally. So today we're going to talk about the upper body strength and power, and then in relationship to shooting performance in wheelchair basketball. So we're comparing between non-disabled person versus just wheelchair basketball athletes. Okay. So we're going to go briefly about the background and some introductions and methods and results and some conclusions. So the background, has anyone seen a wheelchair basketball before? Perfect. So it's one of the most popular Paralympic sports, and it's originally developed for post-war veterans, especially World War II, for them to continue their exercise and then some sports practice. And then the rules are pretty similar to able-bodied basketball or non-disabled basketball. There's a classification system to keep everyone in fair games. So the system is from 1.0 to 4.5, depends on your disabilities. 1.0 are the guys that are C-spine injuries or above, so they have limited ability of upper arm only. And then 4.5 are your typical guys with amputees on the lower body, such as probably like diabetes with feet or foot amputee or below knee amputees. They're all classified as 4.5. So wheelchair basketball is kind of just like your non-disabled basketball. It's a very intermittent, high-intensity sport. So there are a lot of, like, we don't call it running nowadays, wheelchair sprinting, as well as pushing, sudden change of directions, and shooting. So it is probably one of the most studied wheelchair sports or para sports outside of maybe track and field, with some exercise physiology, specifically VO2 stuff. But it's not really that well studied compared to any of the non-disabled sports. So we're talking about American football getting more interest right now. These para sports are probably not even within 10% of research output volume than those sports. A lot of sports are actually coming from where Dr. Weir probably knows from VA hospitals that are doing specifically talking about spinal cord injuries and stuff. And then all the available research tend to be broad, focusing on very niche areas. So this is one of the study was published by our lab with Dimitri. It was talking about shooting performance in relationship with both upper and lower body 1 rep max. So we can see here on the right side, 1 rep max doesn't really correlate well with shooting performance, but we're trying to find if there's a relationship between the same relationship exists in our wheelchair basketball athletes. That's kind of the main purpose of the study, as well as we want to see if any of the previous test metrics are exhibiting the same trends as in our wheelchair basketball athletes. So as Dr. Johnson previously introduced our sports science approach, so we're testing upper body strength and power, which falls and as well as shooting performance. So it's kind of falling within the sport specific testings, as well as your anthropometrics and then strength and power testings. we all know shooting is one of the most important skill in wheelchair basketball. You can't win a game without making a basket. So we also know about 45 to, in wheelchair basketball, free throw percentage is about 45 to 55% shooting, which is way lower than your non-disabled person, which is about 70% free throw shooting percentage is about proficient, according to Dimitri's research. So for the purpose of this study, we're looking if there's difference between wheelchair basketball athletes and then their non-disabled peers in upper body strength and power and shooting accuracy, as well as looking for any possible within group differences on upper body strength and power and shooting accuracies in both the wheelchair basketball group and as well as in the non-disabled group. So we have 10 wheelchair basketball athletes that was actively practicing wheelchair basketball, and then recently they were third place in the national tournament in the Division II level. And then also we recruited 10 non-disabled college age resistance trained individuals. Just to make a note, these people do have higher shooting percentage when standing up. So that was kind of like the prerequisite. So about 50% college level three-point shooting. So we tested, of course, for this study only, we're testing sitting height and weight because, well, you cannot measure standing weight with someone with a lower body injury, and as well as upper body strength. We're using hand grip strength, so we tested 3 times on both sides of the dominant hand and the non-dominant hand, as well as the upper body power with a seated medicine ball throw for 2 times. The shooting is at 5.10 meters, which is just behind the free throw line to make sure all athletes have a decent chance to make baskets. And then every person took 10 shots. This is over there at the 5.10 meters. That's where the shots are taken at. Not for this study specifically, but we also have cameras to capture joint angles, as well as previous mentioned DARE system that also captured all the joint kinematics. But for this one specifically, we're just focusing on strength and power's relationship with shooting accuracy. So, of course, we did descriptive stats, mean standard deviations. Depends on if the data is normally distributed or not. And then if not, then we're doing medians and interquartile ranges. We use Shapiro-Wilks to test data normality, and depends on the data situation. We use either Pearson or Spearman's rule to test correlations. And then for test within group differences, we use pair t-test as well as Wilcoxon-Rank test to test the difference. All tests are set to p less than 0.05 for the matter. What we see here are just some of the basic anthropometric measures. We can see our wheelchair basketball group, which are the wheelchair basketball athletes, are significantly older, as well as shorter than the non-wheelchair basketball group, and then they're also much lighter than your typical non-wheelchair basketball group. This is, well, sitting height, that really depends on your chair height, so that's something we cannot control. But body mass decrease is pretty much well documented with atrophies with lower body due to spinal cord injuries and other disease that makes your lower body not moving. So for over here, we have the dominant hand and non-dominant hand grip strength, as well as the seated medicine ball throw test with a distance. We can see the wheelchair basketball group perform significantly less than your non-wheelchair basketball group. So our college male participants are stronger and more powerful than non-wheelchair basketball athletes. Wheelchair basketball athletes. However, their shooting percentage aren't increasing significantly according to your advantage in strength and power. These are some of the illustrations or figures with the strength and powers relationship with shooting performance. So the solid line is the wheelchair basketball group, and then the dashed line is the non-wheelchair basketball group. And the top two graphs are for the hand grip strength in relationship to shooting performance. And then the bottom one is the seated medicine ball throw, so kind of representing power outputs in relationship to shooting accuracy. This is another study that kind of did similar things with shooting accuracy as well as hand grip strength. So the hand grip strength are the first two rows on this table. They also showed some non-significant correlations between those. However, they're using these what we call a zone test. So basically a fatigue protocol, which for ours it's more laboratory based. So stationary shots, which is a non-fatigue protocol. We're very interested to see later on if we also induced a fatigue protocol, if these results also remains unchanged or not. And for some conclusions, so while strength and power contributes to shooting performance, it is not your sole determinant of success in shooting proficiency. The non-disabled participant did not perform better in shooting accuracy than the wheelchair basketball athletes, despite the biomechanical advantages conferred by higher stature, and underscoring the importance of sports-specific skill and coordinations. And then shooting performance depends on integrating refined techniques. So we got to make sure that the skill component is in there, as well as, but we still shouldn't be forgetting about the strength and power, because they're still kind of like the foundation of the sports, as well as probably all other sports. Some of the limitations, of course, if you're doing para sports, the sample size is always going to be small. But however, we have a upcoming data collection with hopefully 65 athletes. We'll hopefully see similar results within that population. And then, of course, this is a laboratory setting test, so we'll like to do that in a more practical settings, which is kind of the goal of the lab, and we'll see if that also works. And in some future directions, we kind of want to incorporating female participants, as well as if we want to investigate some competition level differences, as well as, of course, some applied settings, such as if we can incorporate some fatigue shooting drills within the population, see if that makes elicit more changes. And I think, yep, that's it. Let me go back.
Maybe I missed it, but what was the disability rating scale for your athletes? What was the average and range?
So we have, the range was 1.15 to 3.5. We have no 4.5s. So most of them are paraplegic.
Okay, but any cervical lesions?
We have one, but we excluded him because he's 0% on the shooting accuracy. So
1.5 would be paraplegia. So you still have full upper body.
yes, but no trunk control.
Okay.
How did you limit the motion in the non-disabled athletes?
The sports chairs specifically are designed to limit, any of the upper or you leave in a chair.
So it doesn't matter if you're or if you're
Yeah. I mean, if you really want to lift up, then you're probably going to flip the chair. I've done that a couple times, so and it's not easy to get up. So, yep.
Have you thought about any other, like
ask you about shooting specific, like strength testing. Like perhaps instead of like in addition to hand grip, maybe more like a going up directions, or maybe like kind of like a pull up or push up stuff.
Absolutely. So we have a wheelchair basketball tournament happening here in January. So for that data collection, we specifically add more strength and power testing drills. We're gonna do some of the testings on force plates. Hopefully, just on it, they're sitting down, but they're gonna kind of the shoulder RYT test to measure the isometric strength, as well as we're using our force frame in our lab to test the internal and external rotator of the shoulders, their strength, to see if that's in correlation with either shooting or any other metrics we're interested in. Yes, sir.
So it looked like in a couple of your scatter plots for the, you actually had negative slopes,
Correct.
but you did separate correlations. You didn't actually look at whether you had an interaction effect.
No.
Yeah, see, when I look at that, I was thinking that the disabled athletes, there's a stronger correlation between the strength and accuracy,
Yes,
but not for the.
not well for the strength specifically. It's a negative, so it's actually inverse correlation.
Okay, oh, so the solid line is
Yeah.
the wheelchair.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Solid is wheelchair. So
Yeah.
the wheelchair athlete.
Well, consider they're not using their lower body. In non-disabled basketball, all the shots and the power generation is coming from your lower body, and then if you take that part out, and then of course you consider them using the chair daily, then upper body strength is going to go up.
I wonder if it's just a proxy for their disability score. Like if you ran a Spearman row with their 1.5 to 4 scale or whatever that is, and their free throw shooting accuracy, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if that is explaining why the stronger people are shooting better.
Well, the highest shooting percentage is actually coming from the 1.5 guys. So, yeah. If you like a lot of them, it also depends on the experience within the sports. We all know that they're shooting kind of like a shot put style instead of your typical basketball. You're kind of more of a projectile, I guess. So with more experience, you kind of learn that, like, trying to adjust from when pre-injury status when you're shooting the basketball, and then that kind of, especially when you're launching from over here instead of here, then it's harder to control where the ball is going.
And your non-wheelchair people were shooting from the chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the non were shooting from the chair. So they have less practice from that.
We had them shooting on the chair for about 30 minutes before we actually tested. So,
I was thinking years.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
So generally, the first time they shoot from the chair, it's either a air ball or you're launching it towards the second rafter.
Yeah, I'd be curious what this would look like if you took like people both wheelchair bound and non-wheelchair bound that have like 0 to minimal like shooting experience at all. See what those relationships would look like.
And does the figure combine both distance,
Yeah.
like the shooting distance you got to shoot?
Oh, which is testing from the 5.1 meter. If we're testing the 3-point line, then it's all going to be 0%.
Just a curiosity question. So for non-free throws, what is the distance that a typical shot is made during wheelchair basketball? Is it within a couple meters of the rim, I would take it, or?
that also depends on your disability status or your classification. So anyone that's like a paraplegic, then it's anywhere between the free throw line towards just within the 3-point line, or their sweet spots. And then for anyone that's below 2.5, then it's mostly likely going to be within the paint. There are not a lot of stationary shots. It's actually easier to cover grounds with the chair than actually standing up and play it, for some reason. So that they're really well defended. There's not really what you call it, the open shots.
Any other questions?
Yep.